In ancient Kemet, death was understood as a transition rather than an end. The dead were treated with elaborate care because the continued existence of the individual in the afterlife depended on the proper preservation of the body and the maintenance of ritual support by the living. Treatment of the dead. After death, the body was taken to professional embalmers. The quality of mummification varied by wealth and status, elite and royal. Full process lasting up to 70 days. The brain was removed through the nose. Most internal organs, except the heart, were taken out and placed in canopic jars. The body was dried with natron, treated with resins and oils, and carefully wrapped in layers of linen with protective amulets. Middle ranks, simpler versions using oil injections or partial organ removal. Poorest, often just washed, packed in natron or salt, and buried in the desert sand, which naturally desiccated the body. The heart was left in place or carefully replaced because it was regarded as the seat of intellect, emotion, and moral character, the organ that would be weighed in the afterlife. The funeral included a procession with professional mourners, family, and priests. The crucial opening of the mouth ritual was performed so the deceased could speak, eat, and breathe again in the next world. The body was then placed in a coffin or sarcophagus and interred in a tomb stocked with food, clothing, tools, shabti figures, and other goods needed for eternal life. What death was like beliefs. Death separated the components of the person. Ka, life force, Ba, mobile personality, soul, often shown as a human-headed bird. Body, the physical vessel that had to remain intact. Name and shadow. These needed to reunite. The deceased journeyed through the underworld, Duat, facing dangers and tests. The climax was the weighing of the heart in the Hall of Judgment before Osiris. The heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, truth and order. If it balanced, the person became an Ak, effective, transfigured spirit, and entered the idealized field of reeds, an eternal, perfected version of life in Egypt. If it failed, the heart was devoured by Ammit, and the person suffered a second, permanent death. Ongoing relationship with the living. The dead were not cut off. Families were expected to maintain the funerary cult, bringing offerings of food and drink, speaking the name of the deceased, and performing rituals. Letters to the dead show that the living sometimes asked the deceased for help or intervention. Neglect of the tomb or cult risked the spirit becoming restless or ineffective. In summary, the dead in ancient Kemet were treated with great care so that the individual could continue existing in an idealized eternal life. Death was a dangerous but navigable passage whose success depended on the preservation of the body, correct rituals, moral conduct in life, and the ongoing support of the living family under Ma'at. Physical, spiritual, and intellectual implications of death and the treatment of the dead in ancient Kemet. Physical implications. Death immediately transformed the body from a living organism into a vessel that had to be deliberately preserved. The physical process of mummification, removal of organs, desiccation with natron, treatment with resins, and careful wrapping was an intensive intervention on the corpse. The quality of this treatment depended on wealth and status. The elite received elaborate preparation lasting up to 70 days, while the poor often received only minimal drying or natural desiccation in the sand. The preserved body became the permanent physical anchor for the deceased's continued existence. Without it, the Ka and Ba risked losing their point of return. Tombs, coffins, and grave goods further extended the physical requirements of death, turning the burial into a furnished house for eternity. Physically, death demanded ongoing material investment from the living family to keep the body and tomb intact. Spiritual implications. Spiritually, death was a dangerous passage through the underworld that tested the deceased's alignment with Ma'at. The heart was weighed against the feather of truth. Success meant transformation into an Ach, an effective, luminous spirit, and entry into the field of reeds. Failure meant a second, permanent death. The elaborate rituals, especially the opening of the mouth, were necessary to restore the deceased's ability to speak, eat, and act in the afterlife. Ongoing offerings and the speaking of the name by the living sustained the spirit. Neglect could leave the deceased restless or ineffective. Spiritually, Death did not sever the person from the ordered world. It relocated them into a new relationship with Ma'at that still required support from the living to remain secure. Intellectual implications. Intellectually, death confronted the Kemetic understanding of the person as a composite being whose identity, memory, and moral knowledge had to be actively maintained. The heart, regarded as the seat of thought and character, was the organ judged. Knowledge of the correct spells, names of gatekeepers, and paths through the duat, provided by funerary texts, was essential intellectual equipment for the journey. The living were expected to remember and recite the name of the deceased, preserving their identity. Tomb biographies and offering formulas reinforced the idea that a person's intellectual and social standing continued after death only if properly supported. Intellectually, death was not oblivion. It was a continuation that required the living to keep the deceased's name, character, and knowledge active within the ordered community. Summary: in ancient Kemet, death carried profound consequences across all three dimensions. Physically, it required the deliberate preservation and housing of the body. Spiritually, it was a high-stakes passage whose success depended on moral alignment with Ma'at and continued ritual support. Intellectually, it demanded the active maintenance of identity, memory, and sacred knowledge by both the deceased through preparation and the living. The treatment of the dead was therefore not merely commemorative, it was the practical means of securing the person's continued place within the ordered cosmos.